Thank you. All right, I know it's the end of the day. How many of you are pumped to hear about mental health and games? Okay, so this is a little bit of a heavy talk. As you can see from the slides, we're going to be talking about PTSD and sexual violence in video games, and specifically about the game that I'm working on right now with my small indie team in Toronto, including my husband as well. So I do need to sort of prep you for the conversation that we're going to be talking a little bit about rape statistics, the Me Too movement, and how we can do better as game designers in crafting our narrative to be responsible to our audience. So, video games, I mean, from what I gathered in German, because I was picking up little pieces, we all know that the medium of games is the next medium of storytelling. So I'd like to get a show of hands from you. How many of you would say that you spent more time playing video games and consuming storytelling as a child versus reading? So video games, okay, and then reading. I like you people. Yeah, okay, this is awesome. I recently gave this talk in Houston at a conference for 22,000 women in technology, and it was really amazing. And you know, one thing that I forget that happens is when you share stories that are a little bit more personal, is that people want to come and share your story afterwards. So if at the end of this presentation you would like to come and privately share your experience with me, I'm okay with that. But I forgot that sometimes happens, because when we speak to people through film or TV or through games, we are connecting with people. Every 98 seconds in North America, a woman is sexually assaulted. That's staggering. And as Canadians, not Americans, we have been watching what's happening south of the border to us, gobsmacked. But we are not immune to the Me Too movement. It is happening all over the world, and I'm sure, has there been a Me Too cultural conversation in Germany as well? Yeah, this is like the groundswell. We're starting to give voice to something that's very important to speak to. One of the interesting things is that after I gave my presentation last week, a woman came up to me, and she was an Army veteran who was a psychiatric nurse. And what she said was, astonishingly, the percentage of men that are also sexually assaulted in the military is very high, but no one talks about it. So this is why I feel so strongly about sharing this game and this story. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. So 1 out of every 6 American women has been the victim of an attempted or completed rape in her lifetime. So that's 15% of American women that have actually experienced rape. I have been assaulted, I have been forced upon, I have been groped, I have been catcalled. And if you feel comfortable, show your hands. You've probably experienced it too, or know somebody for whom that has happened. It's the world that we live in, but it's not the world that we have to live in. I want to briefly just talk about, I make games for women, give you a brief bio on us. So Blair right here is my husband. We do have a copy of Shakespeare's Landlord if you want to play the demo. It's incomplete, but will be complete in 2 weeks. And what we have done for the last 4 years is we spent our time building a narrative game engine. Our focus was, how do we make games accessible, game creation accessible to writers who don't know how to code? And we ended up teaching kids how to use it. So I don't have children, no pets, no plants, no children. If it can't feed itself, it can't live in my house. A worthwhile philosophy. And so we spend all of our time doing this, and we did summer camps to teach children. Bottom line, if you make technology accessible in game creation, then you can change the content, and with content you can change the culture. I'm focused on making smart games for smart women. Now, that doesn't mean you fellows can't play. I would love for you to play our game. And most importantly, what I want is for people, when they finish playing our games, is to have a deeper sense of empathy. So that was something that I had heard discussed after your talk as well, is games is a medium for empathy. It can be a medium for lots of other things as well. So game, I believe the original etymology of the word game, epistemology, is German, which is for amusement, for fun. Well, sometimes games aren't fun. We were approached by people who wanted to create a game of them, their historical experience surviving the London Blitz as a child, or somebody who wanted to create a documentary series and have a game that was about Japanese internment camps. Would we call that game? We would call that an interactive story. So in changing what the topics are that we are talking about in games, we are also changing the nature of the word game. So I like interactive media, that works for me, and I think it just depends on what all that you're bringing into the talk. Women, how many ladies in the room? Let me see. All right, women make up almost 50% of games consumers, and yet I keep getting ads for match 3 games. I would like more. I would like story. In fact, women prefer stories, and there is a large market for adventure games and story-based games. I'm going to skip the conversation about toxic masculinity and gamer culture, because I have a feeling that we're familiar with that. But we really need to stop gatekeeping what we define as game, what content can be put in games, and we can do better. So this is the title shot of our game called Shakespeare's Landlord, and the way that I describe it to people is it's Nancy Drew meets the girl with the dragon tattoo. So everybody's familiar with Nancy Drew. It's a mystery series featuring a young woman, and she, it's a point-and-click adventure game in the Nancy Drew video game world. And Girl with the Dragon Tattoo has some deeper elements to it. In fact, I don't know if you had the same experience, but when I saw Girl with the Dragon Tattoo in the film, I was quite surprised that they did not have put a warning before the beginning of the film saying how graphic that scene was going to be when the woman was assaulted. We're trying to find that balance between exploring the conversation of PTSD and sexual assault without re-triggering people. And that literally has been the job that we've been working on. And also, you can see from this next slide, we make games for word nerds. Right? So it's balancing between the narrative and the gameplay. And I want to share a little story because this game, like many games, is behind schedule. All right, we all know that. We all know that. I got on a plane it's based on a novel, so we work with writers to adapt their work. And this is it's called Shakespeare's Landlord. It's from Charlaine Harris. And some of you may be familiar with her work because she did the True Blood series on HBO with the vampires and the sex. But she wrote this series over 20 years ago, and it's set in a small town in Shakespeare, Arkansas, a fictional town. And she wrote it because she had been assaulted in the 70s. And I remember when we first approached her and asked her for the rights, she said, well, go pick out a list of stuff on my catalog. And I thought, okay, she writes books for women. We want to write games for women. Let's find something that's interesting. And I found this character, and I thought, here is a woman who does not need to be rescued. We're not playing into the tropes of having a man rescue her or heal her or love her or be tender to her. This game is about this woman and her own internal journey. It is so I was saying about going to Dallas. So we had done up a demo, got on the plane, went to Dallas, and she did not like it. When your major IP holder does not like what you've done, it really sucks. It really sucks. So we came home, we parted ways with the writer that we were working with. I cried for a month. I felt sorry for myself. Yeah, right? And I had thought, had we spent a year and $100,000 making this game to lose it, have we screwed this all up? And in fact, it was a gift. The fact that she did not like the game meant that we could go and change the game and focus on what was really important. We were trying to make it 2 hidden objects meets story-based game, and we realized one more story, games, forget about the hidden objects, let's focus on the story. So that's what we did. The game starts where you are placed with a choice, it's standard like point and click, but there's a body in the park. You can touch it, you can run off after the criminal. It deviates from the book in that way. And if you decide to continue to unwrap the body, in the narrative, we're she alludes to the fact that she's feeling a little bit stressed. Why is there a body in the park? And she's mentioning Memphis. And you don't know why she's talking about Memphis. Unless you've read the book, you don't understand the significance of that. When we first purchased the rights to this book, I read it. I thought it was amazing. A year later, we were ready to start development. My husband read the book, and he said, stop. Chapter 5. So chapter 5 is the chapter in which she describes her abduction by gunpoint, her humiliation and assault by multiple people, and the mutilation that she experienced. How are we going to do this game? Like, well, we're not gamifying that piece. So for players, it's not just a point-and-click mystery of who killed this person in the park. It's also the unraveling of the mystery of who Lily is. And we've been very conscious about how we're piecing that all together. That is Mrs. Hofstetler. She's actually my grandmother. I put her in the game. But that's just, one of the conversation pieces that we use. So you can see, like, those elements are very classic point and click. So what's so special about experiencing a mystery game that has the darker elements to it? Well, from the conversations that I've had with playtesters and consultants that we've already been working with that experience PTSD and depression and also sexual assault, what they have said to us is, wow, I can see myself in this. Like, the little themes, little nuances that you've put in this game. So for example, if you go to her desk, she has a diary and she talks about her feelings about other people. Some of the topics that are deeper into the game include slut shaming. So the character Lily, who you're playing as, she is still dealing with her identity as a woman and what does that mean. And she has opinions about one of her clients. She's a housekeeper, a house cleaner, and one of her clients is very laissez-faire about her sexual relations. And so you have that conversation of slut shaming on top of the sexual assault undertones that are happening. And then also you're seeing the conversation of Lily has a fixation on a 17-year-old boy. Now, I think if we were having this conversation 20 years ago, nobody would have an issue with an older person fixating on a 16 or 17-year-old person, because that was the norm. It's like, no big deal, they're 16, they're over the age of consent. But one of the things that we want to bring into this is an awareness that when somebody has experienced a sexual trauma, sexual violence, sometimes that they enter into relationships that are unhealthy. And they are looking for relationships where the power dynamic is flipped. So the fact that she's interested in a young person like that is not because that person is attractive, it's because she's looking to control them. So these are like the more I read through this text, I think I've read through it 15 times now, the more I find more nuance. It's like an English literature criticism of games. So we're trying to put that through and give players the opportunity to see what that mental health issue looks like. There's lots of different art pieces I'm gonna show you from the game. So when we first started this game, we had a very small budget of 30,000 Canadian, which I think is maybe 24,000 German euro. Not a lot of money. And then it grew, and then everything grew. That's why it got delayed. And the art style that we had originally planned to go with for what we call the flashback scenes was actually very like red and black, very horror inspired. If I flip through, that's what it looked like. And then we eventually changed it because somebody at Indiecade, when we submitted our game, said that's really disconcerting and I'm disturbed by this. And I thought, you know what, so am I. So we ended up changing it to this. And when we changed the conversation around just the aesthetic style for her, what we call her flashbacks or her triggers, it changed the entire nature of the art, of the game, of the elevation of the concept. And I want to go back to, this is a scene in which, so we have like chapter transitions and we also have the triggers. So I believe this is a chapter heading. And as we're designing the story and wanting to make sure, this is a 5-part book series. We may or may not get an opportunity to do all 5 books as games. We have lots of other games we'd like to work on. I wanted to make sure that players had that full experience of seeing Lily struggle with her demons, experience it, hit rock bottom, because the beautiful thing about rock bottom, if anybody has experienced this with your depression, because I know depression cycles. We experience it in our household too. We're no strangers to that. When you hit rock bottom, the beautiful thing is you get to go back up. And there is a moment in the book where Lily hits rock bottom, and what I like about this scene in particular is, you can't quite see it on this screen, unfortunately, but you can see that her shirt is bleeding out. There's the pink of like her real life, and then she has her demons that she's haunted by that are always represented by the monochromatic. So that we're trying to distinguish between possibly her false memories, her fantasies, and her memories. Also, in that image, we're never alone. Our past is always with us. So as we are constructing the narrative, we want to make sure that we're also putting in there the behaviors of survivors. Lily does not talk to people. She does not make friends. She's very protective of her privacy, and she has trust issues. She only talks to the people that she works with, and she doesn't have friends. Her job, literally, she goes to work, and then she goes to karate class. And when she goes to karate class, that's all she's thinking about, is how she can protect herself for the next person. And there's an interesting moment in the book, and soon to be in the game, where she is attacked by somebody that she doesn't like. It's not a sexual attack, it's just an aggression. And this person comes after her, and she not only takes him down, but breaks his nose and causes him some pain. And you have that moment of, yeah, she finally she was prepared. In the book, she goes to the gym, and it's a small town everybody knows, and another woman in her karate class says to her, "How did it feel to be ready?" And that is the moment when Lily realizes, because she has not shared her story, that this other person in her class that she has taken karate with for 3 years is also a rape survivor. These are all these little nuances. Think about how many people are in this room. How many people in this room have likely had somebody in their life that has had that experience of being abused by somebody taking advantage or hurting us? And I think it's really important that we use games and the narrative of games to show people that they're not alone. We're being very mindful of how we balance this idea that it's not Lily's fault. It was never Lily's fault. You know, there is a moment where she blames herself because her car was poorly maintained, and that's why it broke down. And if it was a better car, she wouldn't have been picked up by these people. These were professional kidnappers, and it's never her fault. So trying to be really mindful about the message that we ultimately want to have people take away from this. And also, if you have read the book, it's an opportunity for you to explore the world and change the decisions. You get to go after the bad guy who dumped this body. You get to have relationships with people that you might have a hots for that weren't in the book. We're also toying with the idea of adding a female romance in there, which is definitely not in the book and may or may not be to the author's liking. So. And there's definitely tons of misogyny in the book, and we are trying to be gentle about how much we put in there because we're trying to keep it accurate. But sad to say, in 1996 and 2018, misogyny still sucks, right? See, I know you're not paying attention. Misogyny sucks, right? So this is the nightmare image that after she has completed chapter 1 of the game, she's gone to the park, she's either chased or she's touched the body, and you hear these audio cues of her struggling in her sleep. And you know, it was interesting when we showed this to a friend of ours who is also a PTSD survivor. She said, "It's always the faceless men. These are literally the faces that haunt me in my dreams." And to hear that, to to get that acknowledgement from somebody that has had PTSD is an incredible thing. It's really important to us to make sure that we're consulting with people who've had that experience. It's a creepy image. Just like if you're paying attention to all of the context in it, you may pick up that he's got handcuffs in his hand. And it's also, we were very careful about where we placed the camera. So this is a 2D game, no camera movements or anything like that. But you'll notice that the way that the man is sort of coming in, it's not at you. It's like to the side. Every single image that we created in the flashback art, we always made sure that it was off to the side. I don't want you as a player to feel like we're directing this at you. You are playing Lily, but you are not Lily. And it's a very important distinction for us when we were designing the art. So let's talk about game developers' responsibility. I think you covered that quite well in your presentation, I assume in German. But it is really important to us. When we approached Charlene 4 years ago and then signed the contract 2.5 years ago to make this game, it was well before the Me Too movement. I had no idea that we would be making the game during this groundswell. And I feel very strongly as a woman to make sure that we get this right. Like, there's a lot of pressure on us, and I think that's maybe why we didn't do such a great job with the demo in the first place. It's testing very well now, and that gives me a lot of peace in my heart. So sometimes you make decisions as a developer that are not great for your games. And last year, we had the time ticking on the IP. We were going to lose the IP if we didn't get started. That happens. And the only 2 people that I had to write the game were men. How would you as a player feel knowing that you were playing a story about a woman's experience like this that was written by 2 men? Probably wouldn't feel too great, right? So thankfully, the one fella dropped out. My husband was going to continue working on this with another writer. She too had experienced sexual assault, and I thought this would be great. Not that that's great, but at least we would have more connection to the story. You know, my husband is a feminist. We're all feminists at our game company. I believe in equality. And so that was really important to us. But in that moment, we almost made a really stupid decision. And to me, that we need to make sure that we have the integrity when we are creating content. The second book in the series is called Shakespeare's Champion, which is about racial conflict in the South in 1996. 2 white people are not making that game. No, that is Black game devs, Black artists, Black everything, because it's not our story to tell. And that's a very, very important piece of this. Being conscious about the art. You know, I showed you that one image, and we'll slide through it again. The audio and the sound effects, it's where is the heartbeat? Where are the situations and where she has stress? So thinking about the audio as that extra layer of adding that fright, that concern, that anxiety that she has, and mostly what is the narrative. So talking about what is too violent, what doesn't serve the work as a whole. I was trying my best to avoid the word rape in a game about sexual assault. I don't know why. And maybe that's something for me to dig deeper. I think people have some weird ideas about what constitutes rape, because it is a spectrum. Sexual assault is a spectrum. There's groping on a bus, which is completely inappropriate, to the kinds of violent scenes that we've seen in girls with a dragon tattoo. That is what people think, oh, he raped me, it must mean this. But they don't see that it also means, can I say inappropriate words? They don't think that it also means grab me by the pussy. Right? That is assault as well. So we have the responsibility of bringing out this message and saying to people, there are many different ways in which people can be abused that fall under the spectrum of sexual assault. And I'm hoping that this is part of that conversation. One of our investors is also a counselor, has dealt a lot with spousal assault and trauma victims and rape victims. And multiple people who are consulting with this project had that experience. I want to make sure that we get this right. So yeah, so that was the original art. You know, I never liked it, but when you're on a budget and you're on a time constraint, you'll go, sure, and then later, I'm really glad for the opportunity to change that back. So this is one of the images, which is the second most disturbing image. As you can see, like if you just see where the gun is angled, it's not at you, the player, right? That's what I was talking about earlier. I'm still debating on whether or not I like this image. It actually happens in the story to Lily. She manages to get her hands on a gun and she kills her captor. I wish I could leave it out. I don't think it's too violent. I'd love a show of hands. Do you think it's too violent? Okay. Thanks. I appreciate that feedback. When we were trying to decide on the pivotal trigger images, we sort of gave our male artist laissez-faire to do what he wanted, what he thought would be good. He did some really great art. And then the piece that he returned to me was a picture of a woman being pinned down. That was a no. We don't need to see that image. We've seen that image countless times in film and TV. That is an image that does not belong in this game. So I'm really happy about the decision to omit that from the game because, yeah. I'm glad that we're having this conversation, this deeper conversation about mental health in games, because our stories are worth telling in all mediums. Games is still in its infancy. I think we're on the, second or third wave of indie games. It's like all of the games that you were talking about were AAA. Yeah. And we're starting to see more and more indie companies and solo developers write games about mental health. There are some... You know, the one that I always go back to is That Dragon Cancer. If we're familiar with That Dragon Cancer, the story of a man, his son, I think it was about 4 years old, had a form of cancer, and he documented the entire experience from diagnosis, treatment, to his passing. And I know for a lot of people that was too much, like it hit them too hard because there was so much connection there. Everyone dies. Most of us have known somebody that has gone through a sad illness like that. Depression Quest, which has come out a number of years ago, really got us talking about depression in games. There's an interesting woman that I'm giving a similar presentation with in Australia who has written a 10-minute visual novel on her eating disorder. So because of tools like ours, like Twine, like the accessibility of Unity and Unreal, we're starting to see more and more people tell their personal stories. I have a personal story that I would like to make. Not this one. This one means a lot. But for me, I'm hard of hearing. Both my parents are deaf. My sister is deaf. So I was the only person in my house that could hear. And as a child growing up, my dad always said, you're not deaf enough to be part of the deaf community. Which, the more I talk to people that have gender, sexuality, biracial, bicultural experience, first-generation immigrant, they all know what it's like to not belong somewhere. And the thing is, that's not a AAA game. But it's going to be a really powerful game in the indie space. And I bet you that there's at least a dozen of you in here that has a really powerful life experience from that of your own life or from your ancestors that would really move and connect with people. Expression through art is empathy. I mean, that's why we've been driven to make our game engine. To see kids make their games has been really interesting. I love children, but I love them when they go home at 4 o'clock. But for them, it's such an engagement of their storytelling. So it's a very exciting time to be in the indie space to witness this miracle. You know, coming back to the Me Too movement, and I don't know, it's, I'm a US political junkie. I pay more attention to American politics than Canadian politics because there's just so much. It's 24/7 news. And it was very hard to see what happened last week with the Kavanaugh hearings, and to see this woman who had testified so stoically, so clearly as to the experience of her assault, and yet not get justice. And that's a deeper conversation. It's more than just one perspective. But ultimately, this is a slow churning wheel for us to not only shift justice, but to shift culture. And I'm just looking at the preview, but this is the slide that I had asked for 4 months ago. And it just gives me goosebumps looking at it right now, because that's pretty much what we saw last week. This is a woman who, in this instance, in this context, Lily doesn't get her day in court. And so many people never get their day in court. Less than 1% of rapes are actually go to court, and rapists actually serve time. So there are so many people that don't get to have their voice heard or acknowledged. There are so many people with secrets. You've seen that time and time again on social media through the Me Too movement. People who are coming forward from experiences that they had 30, 40, 50 years ago, and they didn't say anybody because they had such deep shame. When I share this with other survivors, what they say to me is, "Me too." And one of the things that I found very interesting after we approached Charlene to sign this book, this is a woman that has sold 36 million novels. She's had multiple television shows. She's got another 2 series that have just been picked up for TV. She's kind of a big deal. So I think it's cool that 2 indies could, land her. By the way, most authors are very open to being landed. A little indie dev tip for you. And at book signings, there are always a lineup of people who want to meet her. And she said, no matter how small the town is, no matter what talk I give, there's always at least one person with a Shakespeare's Landlord series book who says to her, "Thank you." Because we don't see that strong survivor represented in literature enough. We don't even see the real stories of women represented in film enough. And we're not even being represented on TV enough, No offense to all of you fellows, but there's been extensive research done on the actual screen time given to male characters versus female characters, even in female rom-coms. So we definitely need to see a little bit more parity happening there. And so I know that this story is very important to Charlene. It's important to us as developers. Normally, when somebody signs the rights away to their content, they do whatever they want. If you've read the True Blood series, the Sookie Stackhouse novels, and you hated the TV series, you're part of millions of her fans that also had that problem. For us, we want to make sure that we honor her story. And so we've chosen to include her at every part of the development stage to make sure we're hitting all of the right notes. And that's how we operate. We operate from a place of integrity to make sure we're getting not only her story right, my story right, and other people's stories right. So just as I'm wrapping up, we really wanted to think about what was the final image that we would leave players with. And that really is this idea that, well, you can take this if you flip the image. She's coming out of the darkness into the light, or she's leaving her past behind. And it really is whatever you want to make of it. And I think that, I'll get on my soapbox because I'm already here, games is such a powerful medium. I'm seeing so many young people for whom the consumption of their storytelling is coming from this medium. So if you want to make match 3 games, that's okay, I play them. I'll probably even give you some money. If you want to play shoot 'em ups, I'm not going to play them, but my husband will. And if you want to make narrative games that are exploring deeper issues of mental health, depression, we need these games in our lives because they save people. They save people. So I just want to close and say thank you very much. Our demo is supposed to be available at the end of this month because this is the first stop. We're going to Poznan next week. Anybody going to Poznan? What? It's this weekend, the Game Developers Conference, and then we're also going to be showing the game at PAX Australia. So PAX Australia will get to be the first to see this game, but we'd love to invite you to come and play it. 12-year-old kids like it, 40-year-old people like it. I don't understand what the cross appeal is, but I think it's because they get to engage in the story and they love the reading. And our job really, and what we're passionate about, is re-engineering literacy. So thank you very much.